Audrey, oh my god, I broke everything.
Why are you like this?
I don't know.
Did you just break my NASA pen?
Listen, so...
The pen that I got because I started working for NASA? That's my lifelong dream that I finally accomplished at age 27? And you broke it?
So I clicked it and it wouldn't go back on, so I thought it was a mechanism with the thing, and then the metal bit ripped off.
Buzz Aldrin himself gave me that pen?
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG podcast. I am Clayton.
Oh, it's me, Kyle Perkins.
Hi guys, I'm back. It's me, Hayley.
And I'm Lanina.
Are you? I'm, some call me KD, others call me a mess.
Like Amos?
Yeah, like it's Greek.
Ah, cool.
Like your tattoo?
Like my tattoo.
And before we get started, I just want to remind our listeners that you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. And I am personally on Discord as DM Scorpio number 0660, and I have created a channel for Alien Familiar Media. Today's topic, we are going to be talking about things that are good on paper but are bad in execution, such as when a character seems like it's a great idea, or as a DM, the campaign seems like it's going to be a great idea, but then for whatever reason it just crashes and burns. We're going to be talking about some mistakes that we have made, and hopefully talking about some things that we have learned in hindsight, which if we were going to try to fix it in the future, hopefully we wouldn't have such a problem then the next time. I think that from the Game Master's perspective, a very recent terrible idea that I had that was so great at the time that we all jumped at the chance to play was our Mage of Fate game, where it was a King of the Hill style player versus player game inspired by the anime series Fate, Stay Night, Zero, everything else Unlimited. That
it was a visual novel first.
I was looking at you and waiting for you to say that.
Nah, I'm predictable. I think it's fucking hilarious that we all thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Every single one of us went in there like, yeah!
That's not true.
You didn't play, shut up.
Whoa! We saw the future coming.
That's why we stepped out.
Well, maybe you should have said something to us.
To you.
It's not for...
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Listen,
hey
we
guys,
can't help it if you have bad taste.
this seems like an idea.
It was an idea that had the most enthusiastic response of the ideas that we were putting out at the time.
I was very excited.
Yeah, me too.
Were you
I
excited?
still enjoyed myself.
Were you excited because you liked the world that it was centered in, or were you excited because you were looking forward to the player versus player aspect?
Oh, I love Fate. It's a great universe. And plus I was like, I get to pick a historical servant to be my buddy.
Me too.
Yeah, yours was certainly something.
For me, it was both, Hayley. I was excited for the universe, but also we hadn't done an acknowledged player versus player game, which is the reason you two stepped out.
Yeah.
Actually, don't fucking talk about your tastes. I don't want to hear about that shit. You
So
couldn't handle the heat, so you stepped out the kitchen.
So straight up, I was highly considering doing it because while I did not have the best time doing the unknowns player versus player game with Apocalyptia, I was considering it, but I wanted to look at the anime. I got 2.5 episodes in, and I decided that it was not for me on a taste level. But I was looking forward to getting some well-earned revenge against my assassinators.
I'd like to see you try.
You would have definitely been able to kill me, but good luck killing Kyle or Chris.
Yeah, I heard that.
God, my character was so fucking good, but little did I know.
Chris's was better.
Chris was better.
Yeah.
I'm just a naive piece of shit, and so I'm easily just wound around people's fingers, and I would lose rapidly, so that's just not my place to
Like a cute little worm. Like kind of going around
a
fingers.
little worm.
Yeah.
See, I just...
Inching away from this game.
there she goes. To finer pastures.
Who was your servant?
Bond. James Bond.
Why was it so bad, though?
Because we all went into it thinking it was going to be like like the anime or like this great fun romp, and then we get to the game and the players acted shockingly like role-playing game players and did everything that a role-playing game player would do if they knew they had to fight the other players sitting around the table.
I protest that. Because I did not. I tried to play it like an anime, but no one else wanted to come out and tango.
Can you please describe to me what the difference would be from... Because, like I said, 2.5 episodes in, I stopped. What is the difference between playing it out like an anime and then playing it out like a role-playing game?
You don't need to know. You don't need to know Fate Stay Night to answer this question. I guess it helps, but like in any over-the-top anime situation, you have your antagonists and your protagonists, and there's always that scene where they're right in front of each other, or like, you know, one of them's like looking through a sniper scope and he calls the person to bullshit and fucking gloat and talk and be like,
I got you now.
yeah, you know,
It's
like...
time to duel.
In the source material, there is one author who gets to decide when a particular character is going to do something that is going to further the plot. Whenever you've got a bunch of players sitting around the table, they are all waiting for the person... Well, I'm sorry, Katie. There are going to be players who are going to sit there and wait for somebody else to make the first mistake so that they can pounce on it and so that they can seize victory right then and there. You don't have the benefit of some one mind causing the interaction between all the players or all the characters. You have each player looking out for number one, and their focus is not on creating a good story. Their focus is on making sure that their character is the one at the end.
Okay, I think that's very interesting.
Unlike an anime or many other works of fiction, when a threat pops up out of nowhere that's really scary and legitimately dangerous, you know, like, say somebody, I don't know, hiding in a mile underground bunker able to teleport infinite explosives to you, just as an example. If that were to happen, there's always, like, some kind of protagonist power that the author writes in,
to get
or the creator of the anime writes in, so that they survive. You know, the power of friendship, or some shit.
Oh, okay.
And that doesn't exist in this RPG. And indeed, the person in a mile underground bunker who can teleport infinite explosives anywhere wins.
Yeah.
But he didn't, did he? He ran out of legend points, so technically Nina Richner was the winner.
Let's be honest though, had it played out, like, he would have won.
I don't know. Because if Nina could have just fucking stayed hidden, and I don't think Chris was going to come out of his bunker and, like, risk himself, because that was his whole deal. He played as risk adverse as possible. If Nina could have just stayed hidden, literally through no choice of his, Chris would have lost by
Chris
legend
was going to
points.
be one of the first people to have their servant fail because of running out of the legend points, because he'd spent more than most of the other players at that point in the game, where we decided to basically make it a draw.
And you guys are running Scion, right?
We were running a version of Scion.
Cool.
It was not 100%.
Yeah, the servants were all in Scion, but the mages, the masters were all in
And
Mage.
I think that was an example of good idea on
Interesting.
paper, good idea in execution, by the way. If you wanted to talk at all about that, maybe a different episode, but I love that. That was cool
Yeah,
as hell.
no, that was fun.
Yeah. In that particular instance, I tried to avoid having a particular servant who was... Well, I tried and failed to make it so that there wasn't one particular servant who was so much more powerful than the others. There was a couple of rules that I got wrong for Chris's servant, and if I designed the character knowing that problem was going to come up, that he was going to be so powerful in casting spells, I would have limited it in some way. But for everybody else's, I was able to design their servants so that there was some rock, paper, scissors aspects to them, where the melee characters were weak. Like, one melee character would be weak against another melee character, and also weak against another ranged character. So there was some... And each character had several people that they were strong against and weak against. So there was some sort of balance going on there.
Interesting.
But I didn't have control over making the characters that the players played And that's where the whole thing fell apart, is because we had one person or two people with 4 dots in time, and they were just foreseeing things before they happened, or making such precise plans that there was nothing that everybody else combined couldn't overcome.
I think a way to have done this is what you touched on earlier, would have been sitting everyone down and being like, the best way to get an anime feel from this game could have been not playing to win, but playing to make the best story, which unfortunately in a PvP game, it's going to be real hard for you to be like, yeah, don't play like the most ambitious like tactical character that you can, like, you know, do this instead. So I don't even know. I almost feel like maybe that it would have to not be a PvP game for you to accomplish the vibe the correct way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you'd have a group of players who agree to make the kinds of characters you see in anime. Like somebody who's got a lot of heart but no skill. Someone who is like extremely talented and has had a lot of experience, but they're like jaded and they don't give a shit, so they're apathetic. Like, you'd have to agree to make those tropes and make weaknesses into yourself
that people can use against you,
which could work. And maybe that's not something we talked about on our PvP episode, did we?
I don't think so.
Interesting. But like, I guess that kind of role playing is a very interesting thing when it comes to PvP, and something that could be done, but it takes a particular kind of group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That would be really... Oh, sorry, good.
I think that, ironically, in a player versus player game where you're trying to make the best story, you would have to have a group of players who are not trying to win. You would have to have a group of players who were dedicated to making the most awesome anime story as possible, rather than trying to win the game.
Interesting. That could be fun. I think especially that would work out if your GM made NPCs that were like really tough looking on paper and became antagonists fairly early on for the PvP versus each other protagonists to maybe temporarily form alliances against. And the GM would have to make their, like, much like fucking Dragon Ball Z, right? Like, your first big badass dude. I don't know if the players can win. Of course they're going to win. You'd have to kind of take the tactical fall and then up the ante to the next one. And then at a certain point stop doing that so the players can backstab each other and, you know, whatever. I think it could work, but it's a very interesting type of storytelling that is...
I don't know if it would work with this group.
Might not work with this group. It's at least something very different from the way we have played before.
It also probably requires a lot of planning.
That's true.
Yeah, at least a session of sitting down and opening up about your characters, and which none of us did, and which was fine, in theory. On paper, fine on paper, bad in execution. Title drop again.
Like that was sort of what happened with me, was, you know, I had, like, this whole backstory, like, you know, at any point, people could have, like, gone for my character's sister that he was trying to, like, get healthy again. They could have, like, gone for his wife. They could have, you know, done anything like that, but instead it was just much more tactically superior for Chris to, like, find my apartment and blow it up, you know? Like, I don't know. I guess, again, good idea on paper, bad idea in execution. In terms of, like, me, I guess, I'm not going to transition into the player part, but I guess in that regard, me making this sort of anime-esque character was good on paper, but then bad in execution because everyone else was approaching the situation much more tactically. So, I guess that's my example there for that.
I don't know, I've played anime games that are just a blast and a half because we're all just a bunch of dummies, and I'm currently the go in and punch people thing, and, you know, it's painful, and I get what I deserve, but we all agreed to be anime characters, and...
Yeah, I don't think the failing was that we chose to do an anime game. I think the failing was that an anime game is contrary to the aesthetic of PvP. And most role-playing games are going to be antithetical to that, because very few games have the characters balanced against each other. You're balanced against the enemies that you would face, so that the fighter can get up there and hit. The cleric can stand behind the fighter and heal him. The rogue can sneak behind and stab him in the back, while the wizard casts spells to nullify their defenses or things like that.
I'm sorry it didn't work out for you guys.
I still had a
was-
rollicking
yeah.
good time.
It was a lot of fun until it wasn't.
And that happened pretty quickly. Like,
Yeah.
we were really cruising and having a good time, and then I feel like there was one session of plateau stagnation, and then we were all like, oh shit, this isn't gonna work.
Was
Because
it
Chris's hold up. The rest of us can't get him. The rest of us aren't gonna really betray each other that much. We're fucked. What was your question,
No,
Connor?
I was gonna say, was it the session where, like, we dug ourselves out of the rubble, and we're like, alright, where is he? And then we're like, oh, he's
Hiding.
way down in an impenetrable bunker we can never get to.
Yeah.
And then we were like,
That whole session was, well, how do we get to him?
does this work? No, I declare the entire city under martial law. Oh, that doesn't work either. Fuck.
You guys say to me, does this work? And then I look at the notes that Chris had sent me, and I say, I'm sorry. No, it doesn't.
Like, when you were like, as the GM, I can safely say nothing you guys can do will work, I was like, yeah, this game is
Yeah, like Clayton looked at our character sheets and our servant sheets, and looked at Chris's notes and his shit, and was just like, I can't see a way out of this. So who's got the most legend points? But I guess that's an important thing to acknowledge, is that even when an idea doesn't work out, you're still going to have fun. You know, don't be afraid to try shit. Mm-hmm. I don't regret that we played this. We learned a lot. I did have a rollicking good time fucking hanging out with Bond. Are you kidding me? Jesus, man, that was great. I could have just done the whole game, like, just me and Bond, like, laughing in the sunshine, playing in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Like, it's just so good. That's what it was like, by the way.
Yeah.
Cruising around in his Bentley, that song on repeat, drinking martinis.
Shaken, not stirred.
Oh, yeah.
Besides player versus player, I think that there's also a lot of other ways that a game could be good on paper but not good in execution, like having too many players. I don't have too much experience with that because I normally try to cap it around 5, but I know that, Katie, you have some experience with that, don't you?
Yeah, I ran a game a couple years ago that was like historical fiction. And the whole game was designed, it had like 12 people in it, but I designed it, multiple people were like, yeah, we can't come every week. And so I was like, oh, that's fine, this will be like a drop in, drop out, like, you know, I'll try to make the campaign to be a little flexible and such. Well, the problem was, everyone kept showing up, and so instead of it being like, oh, it's only like 8 people this week, it was never 12, sorry, it was about 10, but like, you know, rather than being like 7 or 8, it was always a full party of 10, and then it got to a point, because that many people were showing up, that when people did drop out, or in or out, they were too invested in the plot, and so then I was like, well, I can't do the stuff I wanted to do this week, because this person's not here, because for the first, like, month the game ran, everyone showed up every single week. So that was my sort of great, like, I was like, man, I'm so smart, I'm gonna get around having this huge player size by having this be drop in, drop out, but then, like, you know, if the players don't ever drop out until, like, a month in, you're kind of screwed.
See, your problem is that you're really good at making games. How dare you?
I guess. But, yeah.
There was also that one Geist game where we started out with 6 people and ended up with, like, many.
Yeah.
And it was just, like, you having to run all of the different, like, Geists and the characters all being there, and it was, like, ended up being... How many did you have to do?
Well, it was, like, it started out 6 people, it turned into, again, like, 10. But then I had to also play each person's Geist in addition to their any NPCs and the NPCs' Geists. So it was literally me just, like, talking to myself for...
Most of the game?
Most of the game, which was not how you want to run a game. Don't talk to yourself a lot. It's not fun.
Very recently, I ran into the problem of having too many players. I started up a game on Roll20 of D&D 5th edition in the Planescape setting, and I've been playing on Roll20 basically since it came out. So I've had a few hiatuses, but it has been my experience that in every previous game that I have been a player in or ran, after the first session, approximately half the players drop. Either they just don't show up, or most of the time, they just don't show up without any reason. Some of them they find out that they don't like the game. So I had...
I thought you were going to say they found out they don't like me.
Well, they never tell me, so I can't say.
Fair enough.
You got ghosted.
Yes,
RPG ghosted.
You get ghosted a lot on online role-playing games. And so I set this game with an 8-player cap, thinking, okay, every game I've ever been in, after about session 5, I have to... the game master has to start re-advertising to get new players into the game because so many people have dropped. I am now on session 5, and I still have 7 players.
Yikes.
In an online... Well, we have voice chat, but everything is through the Roll20 system, or Roll20 website app. And so it's really hard to give everyone their individual time that they need to have, their individual spotlight time, and spreading it out so that not a single player dominates, because I also have the problem of having some players who are less active than the other players.
Can I ask you a question?
No. Okay. Kyle?
Wow.
Hayley, go ahead.
So I know that the last time that our group really... that I remember playing with you guys was with Savage Worlds, and we had roughly around 9 people on a good day. What is the difference between playing a large group in person versus a large group online? Are there different challenges you have to overcome?
Whenever you're playing online, you can't see the expressions of all the people who are sitting around your table to gauge whether or not they are invested in what's going on, whether or not they're interested, whether or not they even care. So it's a lot more of just... as the game master, just putting it out there and hoping that people are having fun rather than being able to see whether or not people are having fun.
Okay. That's interesting.
It's also weirder when people talk over each other because you've got the microphone interface instead of, being next to people, so it just turns into a mess.
Yep.
Or sometimes you can, talk to each other back and forth, but you try to, talk over somebody on a mic and it's just
And the slight amount of lag that exists whenever you're talking over a mic means that 3 people start talking, 3 people pause for a couple seconds, and then 2 people start talking again.
Or I was going to say 3 people go ahead at the same time.
And then there's technical difficulties that you have to deal with as well. On top of that, there's been so many games that we've run online that just is the first hour is oh, is your microphone working? Can you hear me now?
Oh, your computer's too old to run Skype? Oh, okay.
Skype isn't
Why would you ever use Skype? Oh, God. Discord.
This is the first time. This is the first time I've run on Discord, and Discord is going phenomenally well.
I usually am fine with Discord, but we have one player now that's just mic is bad, mic is quiet, there's people with fans and that interface, and it's just a mess.
What was that, sir? Say it again. I swing at the goblin. Great. I love that.
Are you in an airplane? Where are you right now?
I'm flying across the Atlantic. My name's Fred Noonan. Hello.
Wow, we're playing a game with Fred Noonan.
Noonan, actually. Amelia Earhart's co-pilot. Thank you. The one time a woman upstages a man.
Nerd.
You're gonna get hit.
I'm acknowledging how sad it is for you guys. Jeez. I had a real point to make. Online stuff, doing games online. So, the only way I've ever done it, for the most part, is with text. And it's interesting and kind of antiquated. I don't know how it would go in 2018, but you have the advantage of a log of what was said if you scroll up in the chat. You have the advantage of it takes a while to type something out, and so you don't get people all speaking at once. I guess the DM would have to kind of compile what was said in the past few lines and paragraphs into something that makes sense. But I'd be really curious to hear if anybody out there in podcast land does role-playing with text chat these days.
I'm actually my current game that I was just talking about, it does incorporate the text chat because I've got a dedicated channel for text in between sessions to describe what their characters are doing during downtime, having character conversations. But you get into the issue of some players are more active than others during that downtime, and there are some players who are active in spurts. And so it's another balancing act of making sure that everybody is having enough screen time. And then you've got the extra layer of, okay, they've been saying a lot in the text chat during the week, but they're not saying a lot during the session while we're sitting around, while we're all in the voice chat. So it's another layer of just working out so that everybody gets their moments to shine.
I feel that. I am no longer attached to my LARP. We had a very bad falling out, but one of the mechanics that I think worked really well is the downtime text chats, where we had our different factions, and then we had the group chat for everybody, and our DM would go around like once a week or like once every other week, and he'd note who's like very active, and then he'd do like give people who aren't as active, they'd like private message them, or they would at them in the group and give them like something to do so we can all talk and stuff. And then we had a fixed date of when all the downtime would come out, so you compile all of the things that we've been talking about for a month and then give us reactions or consequences because of them. And then the next session, it would be like 3 or 4 days afterwards, and we'd have to deal with that in character. And I thought that was a really great way to manage it. And we had roughly 23 to 25 people.
Wow.
It was a huge group. And I had a really great time. I was extremely active in it. But that's because I have no life. And that was one of the things that I thought worked really well, and I'd actually like to take that aspect and put it into other games.
Yeah. Well, LARPs are a little bit different than a tabletop game, because LARPs are designed to have a bigger player pool.
Yeah.
And they're designed to not have to require to have the game master there at all times, adjudicating what was going on, doing things for the player, like deciding what NPCs are doing and how the NPCs are driving the story. LARPs, it seems, are a lot more player-driven, and the plots are created by the characters more than what a typical tabletop game has.
You ain't wrong. But I feel like there's a lot. My whole one experience with a LARP, now I'm the master. I feel like there are a lot of aspects I would like to take from LARPs and put them into other games like player agency, having more time outside of the actual story of the game, getting to know characters and giving them more opportunities to really bond as a group.
I feel like it's hard, though, to balance that out in general.
Of course.
Unless there are no consequences from text RP in large groups, there's always going to be somebody that can't be as active as the others, and you get less things in general, and you get less scenarios, and you're less involved, and then when it comes for that large compiled list, it's just like, oh, I was in there once or twice, but then there's that person that was there every day of the month, and they just get everything.
I think you can't help that. Like, if you have a player who is just not as free, and you have some players who have more free time and are very dedicated to the game, and they take advantage, like, fully, not in a bad way, but they absolutely use to the best of their ability the text channel, and they'll have, like, outside of the game role playing, and they'll send you emails of their plans and all that stuff. You can't help that difference in player free time. All you can do is just make sure you're giving the less busy players like the opportunity and the same platform, even if they don't take advantage of it, and just try to balance that. I've heard some horror stories about groups where out of session roleplay seems to be more important than the sessions themselves, and it can really cause some jealousy and definitely some friction amongst the group. Just be wary of that and do your best to give them that platform and make sure they know it's there, and try to do something interesting and exciting during your session instead of just spending your session like reviewing what happened in between and giving that all the spotlight. I guess that spotlight is the kind of core point I'm trying to make. Make sure everyone has the same opportunity for spotlight.
And another thing is very clearly delineate what is going to earn in-game rewards such as experience points, currency, and things like that. With my game, I told all the players at the very beginning, I would love for you all to role play here in this downtime channel, but you are not going to earn any experience points here. Luckily for me, 5th edition D&D has some very good downtime rules as far as what can be accomplished and like earning money during downtime. So I've used that as the balance for making sure that no one particular person is earning more in-game rewards. Now, that's not to say that some players aren't earning more insubstantial rewards, such as discovering additional plot lines or creating more plot lines. There's definitely that going on, and that's something I'm going to have to balance. And it's really too early for me to say what is going to work, because right now I'm only 5 sessions in, so I'm still on a lot of this stuff is really good on paper.
Yeah, I understand that.
We're going to kind of shift gears now, because we have some other things we want to talk about besides those, specifically in the as a game master, things that are good ideas on paper, bad in execution. Evil campaigns. Players love them on paper.
Is that meme of like, players love it, but GMs will hate you.
This one weird RPG trick.
Yeah, piss off your GM with this one weird RPG trick.
Yeah, I have done one campaign that, in hindsight, it was an evil campaign, but at the onset of the campaign, I had said it was a campaign with no... there is no presupposition as to whether you are playing good characters or evil characters. And also in this campaign, I designed all of the characters, and I designed each character for a specific player to play. So I was really focused on each player's strengths and weaknesses and gave them a character who fit those.
Nice.
That has been an anomaly. I have tried to do an evil campaign a couple of other times. Every single time it falls flat on its face. And I think the reason why it falls flat on its face is because I don't have that level of control at the very beginning. The players make their characters, and they make characters who absolutely are not going to get along. Even more in a evil campaign than in a put in quote marks traditional game. The players and the characters have to have a reason for being together. Otherwise, it just devolves into player versus player. That's the only way that I can think of to prevent... Well, it doesn't prevent it. It just helps to curb it away from just devolving into a bunch of players playing chaotic, stupid murder hobos who will kill anyone and everyone who stands in their way, including other player characters.
Yeah. That would be one of my concerns of running an evil game, is it paves a path for murder hoboage. And I don't know of an easy fix of that, other than aligning, like, you guys are evil, but you all have the same goal, and you must work together to achieve it.
I've played in an evil campaign, so I haven't run it, but I guess I can vouch for what you guys are both saying, because it did devolve into me. There was 3 PCs. Me and another PC just wanted to be murder hobos, evil stupid. And the third PC was going for more of a, like, string puller, like, lawful evil sort of thing, while we both wanted to be neutral evil. And brutes, you know. And so we ended up actually, I've talked about this, but, like, totally stabbing each other in the back. And, like, I killed him, but he, like, turned me into a, he, like, locked me in a locket, but he was dead, so no one won at the end of the game. That is, I can attest that that's exactly what happened. Like Hayley was saying, we should have sat down and been like, okay, well, what's our united goal here? You know, but instead it was like, 2 people were on the same page, one was not, and then that one person that wasn't got frustrated that we didn't want to, like, play the game the same way he did, and so he started trying to kill us, and then we're like, well, if you're gonna try to kill us, we're gonna try to kill you, you know, and Evil campaigns.
I think that more than just a common goal, the characters have to be best friends. Because if they're not best friends, then the moment the mission is over, everything falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
You have to continually contrive a reason for them to be together.
I'm just thinking of, like, evil villains, like, holding hands and, like, making best friend bracelets.
See, that'd be a lot of fun for me. I'd love a game where, like, it's an evil game, but it's evil versus the world, you know?
Just because you're evil doesn't mean that you don't have connections. I mean, like, Saddam Hussein was loved by the people who was closest to him.
Yeah.
Hitler was loved by the people who were closest to him. Just because you're evil doesn't mean that...
But, no, that's fair. I think that, that's a good way to go about it, having people be, like, best friends, or, like, siblings, but not, like...
Evil packs.
Game of Thrones, yeah, like, not Game of Thrones siblings, where they're gonna, like, fuck each other, or stab each other in the back.
Well, Game of Thrones is a good example of how people who are evil aren't just fucking isolated on their own.
Lannisters, I mean...
Sure, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. Cersei, like, has some redeeming traits, but is mostly considered an evil character, I would say, by many people's standards. And she has an entire, like, sort of family of connections. She has people who serve her. And indeed, part of her storyline is, at least in the book where I'm at, is, like, her starting to kind of break those connections down, and she suffers because she cuts off her connections. And I think that is something people don't expect when they want an evil campaign. They become murder hobos. The DM should, and really seriously should, be like, okay, yeah, so you become a murder hobo. Suddenly nobody wants to help you, you have no connections, no one will serve you, no one will sell you anything. Yeah, there you go. Have fun. Enjoy.
See, at least, though, if you're... Cause I still think that, like, if everyone's on board, including the GM, a murder hobo game could be good on paper and be okay in execution. Like, you just really need the player characters to all, like Clayton said, be, like, just, like, blood siblings. Like, just, like, fucking never gonna betray each other, always just sticking together no matter what. So even if there is a point where it's like, yeah, you guys are the fucking scourge of God, like, no one will serve you no matter what, God, you're not gonna...
Scourge of God. I want that as a tattoo.
That was
Attila
Attila.
the Hun.
Oh.
He was called the Scourge of God.
Wow. That's fucking cool. Did not know that.
But yeah, like, even if that's happening, you know that, like, Anselm Longsword was never going to betray you. Like, he'll cut down peasants with you till the end of days. And I think that could be fun for a couple sessions.
Another thing, if you're going to do, like, a murder hobo campaign or an evil campaign or something like that, look in history at who has been either villains or who have been basically like outlaw heroes. Like the James Younger gang in the Wild West. They stole from banks, they stole from railroads, but then they had communities that they would go to, and they were absolutely loved because they fought for the Confederacy. They were continuing to fight for the Confederacy even after the war was over. You've also got the example of, like, Billy the Kid, who he had certain towns that he would go to, and he was like a living legend there. Everyone loved him, but then he would go somewhere else to do all the bad things that they did in order to get their money, get their wealth.
And he probably wouldn't dream of stealing and fucking over a town that shelters him, feeds him, loves him, supports him.
Right.
I mean, even Attila, historically, like, set up a community. Like, he wasn't raiding his, like, fellow Huns,
Right.
He was raiding the fucking Romans and the civilized folk. So I think, like, a good way to set up a murder hobo game could even be you're playing, like, nomadic raiders. Because that way you can pillage, you can kill, you can be as murder hobo as you want, but, like, you still have, a community that you go back to, and even if you don't, like, give them all the spoils, like, your actions are still benefiting them. Like, you're still helping someone, even if it's indirectly.
Yeah, and also look at, like, Genghis Khan. Use that as an example of another character from history who, up until Hitler, he was the worst thing that you could call somebody. I mean, he forged an empire. He he was able to unite an entire people to basically burn down everything else.
Yeah. So I think, again, to bring it back around, like, evil games, if done with these caveats, could be good on paper and good in execution. But if those things aren't really there, like, it tends to be more often good on paper, bad in execution.
And I think that's half the reason why we talk about this stuff, is that you really wouldn't know that until you played the game. Or you had players that did that to you, you know. We tell you now, so you don't have to make the same mistakes as us.
Don't suffer the way we did.
I also feel like an all-evil one-shot could do it, too. And, like, then you could just do whatever the hell you wanted and get that out of your system and be like, I would never be able to play this in a full campaign. It was fun for this night to just be the biggest asshole and murder all of the people.
So, another mistake that I've done, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, like, on paper, like, learning a new system and getting to where I have the, like, say, the core mechanic pretty much in my mind, but I really haven't gone over, like, all the nitty-gritty of, like, how combat works or how entire swaths of the spells work, and then deciding, you know what, I'm going to add a armor as damage reduction system to D&D. I'm just pulling this example out of thin air. This is not anything I did 15 years ago. But whenever I did it, we got probably half the session before I started realizing that, well, there's always going to be one player who knows the rules well enough that they're going to be able to exploit any changes that you have made to the rules. They're going to see why the rules were not intended to do that to begin with. It just opens up all sorts of unintended consequences for how their character is suddenly so much more powerful than any other character who was there in the game. I've been on both sides of this as the game master and as the player. In a game I played about 10 years ago, the game master had basically a very heavily modified version of D&D 3.5, and I saw this class that I don't even remember what the class was called. It was like something like Noble or something like that. But essentially, it gave me from the very beginning of the game a follower who was a player, who was as strong as a player character.
Wow.
So I was basically walking around with two characters. I min-maxed one character to be a talkie character, and I min-maxed the other character to be a destroy everything in combat in less than a round.
Wow.
So that was the worst that I have ever min-maxed a system, because there was no situation I couldn't get out of.
Nice. I'm currently homebrewing Scion right now, and that was a mistake for me because I didn't understand Scion from the get-go. Nevertheless, I should modify it. But the game that I'm running right now, I wanted to take my players from basically mortal, and depending on the path that they choose, whether or not they want to follow the path of good or evil or maybe something in between, ascend to a godlike level. And completely, halving, all the stats in the beginning, not giving them access to their birthrights, not knowing their parents, and then also learning the tick system for the first time and learning Scion for the first time, and also trying to do an emergent story rather than a plot-driven thing. I just bit off way more than I can chew, and I've been very unsatisfied with how my game has been running for the past 3 sessions. And then last session, I decided that I need to focus on one thing I'd like to do new and really put my effort into learning it and making sure it's perfect, and then going back to things I feel more comfortable in. So we just had our 3rd session, and joined us for the first time, and I decided to go back to my plot-driven stories that I'm really good at. I decided the tick system was going to be what I was focusing on, starting to give my players their birthrights, and I felt like it really worked a lot better. I was more concise, I was more focused, I felt more comfortable, and, I feel like it's really important to just pick 1 or 2 new things to learn, and really try and play them out. And it's okay to try something new and realize it doesn't work, and I felt like it was a lot easier for me to fix my mistakes. But those first 2 sessions were miserable. It was awful. I really felt like I didn't have control of the world, and I wasn't able to give the storytelling adventure I wanted to my players.
I wouldn't have said it was awful.
Thanks, I guess.
I had fun.
I'm glad you guys had fun. It's just, I was really struggling with making sure that you guys were able to do the thing that makes Scion fun, which is you guys have superpowers. And I took that away from you.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
On top of that, we had somebody Skyping or Discording in, and that was just a nightmare.
Yeah, they were only supposed to do that once, and then they got stuck in Columbus for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a Skype in, and it was miserable. But we have everybody now, and I'm on a good trajectory, and I've fixed it. But no one to cut your losses when you're homebrewing. I feel like that's a really good fix.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to sleep in the grave that you've made. It's okay. You can claw your way out. I believe in you.
You mentioned having one player Skype in or video in or come in. Been there, done that. Doesn't work very well because...
What did they say?
Yeah.
What?
You said that? I can't hear you. The microphone is too far away from that one player.
Yeah. It's hard. And I've also been that player who Skyped in when I was living in London. I just didn't have any friends, so I would Skype into my old group and try and play with them. But, I was lonely enough to stick it out, I guess.
Moral of the story is that if you have a player who can't make a session and has to Skype in, just murder them.
Yeah.
Kill them.
Oh, I'm sorry. The internet went out.
Yeah.
You guys ever seen the movie Unfriended? That's actually just a GM killing.
Is that fucking
Skype
like
movie?
FaceTime?
Yeah,
Skype
we watched
movie?
it. Remember,
Oh,
it was
Jesus Christ.
it was pretty bad.
And
And the whole movie is told, from their Facebook feed and shit, and they're on Skype or something. Anyway.
It's like, it was just a big Skype commercial. Like, every single time they played that, like, boo, bee, boo, bee, boo, bee. Like, it was just
Trying to make the Skype
bad.
dial tone spooky was their first mistake. Anyway, I have tried to homebrew stuff in, and I think my mistake comes from I've never actually run a core D&D game where players get beyond level, 6.
Don't do it anyway.
And so, because of that, people's characters start to get some pretty cool shit once they get, after level 5. And so my solution has just been, I can just homebrew the cool shit in for them earlier, and then I don't have to worry about leveling them up. And that's been my biggest mistake when it comes to, core D&D, is the fact that I'll do stuff like that. And so that just comes from me just not knowing how to run a game for characters past 5, basically.
KD, I've been playing for 20 years, and 9th level is the farthest I've ever gotten.
Okay.
So, don't feel bad.
Yeah, but that's always been my error there. Or trying to do something where, specifically, 3.5 D&D, I know pretty well, maybe not perfect, but, I'm definitely comfortable in the system. But trying to take something like that and maybe make it work for something that it isn't designed for. So, Bleach, the anime, for example, I tried to adapt that to 3.5 D&D, and I realized that, that version of D&D, at least, isn't dynamic enough to be able to do some of the things you get in, fiction. And even beyond, anime examples, Lord of the Rings will work fine, right? It's a pretty straight-up traditional fantasy-style thing. But, something like Game of Thrones even is a little more difficult. Because, it's you're trying to take a low fantasy game and put it in a high fantasy, system.
Well, D&D was designed to emulate Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that is not built to emulate, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't designed to.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had that problem where then my solution is I'll try and homebrew things in to make it dynamic enough to fit these things, and then you run into problems of you're just kind of breaking the system a little bit, or these things don't work this way, stuff like that. So
would you say that the solution would be to experiment with new systems?
yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something you should do for sure anyway. But if you do want to run something in an existing universe, whether it's an anime or it's, a TV show, if you really like Altered Carbon, for example, right? I don't know a whole lot about the show. I've seen it around. People talk pretty highly about it, but it's like a sci-fi thing. Maybe I'm never going to recommend Eclipse Phase for anything. So probably not Eclipse Phase, but some other sci-fi system might work well for Altered Carbon.
Well, the book Altered Carbon was the main inspiration for the Eclipse Phase.
Well,
so
Clayton, I cannot ever recommend Eclipse Phase as a system. I just can't. But anyway, pick something that maybe would work out a little bit better. I keep going back to anime. I guess I'm a weeb. But like Fate works pretty well. Fate, the system, works pretty well for anime because it's flexible enough that it can be dynamic enough to have those moments and those changing elements. But yeah, so totally, I try a new system out, even if you don't know it super well. I ran my first ever Apocalyptia one-shot a couple weeks ago, because I always wanted to do, like, a fun zombie raider storyline, and that was cool. But, like, could I have run it in World of Darkness, which I'm much more comfortable in? Sure, but, like, it probably wouldn't have fit as well as what Apocalyptia can do, so.
Anytime you're going to homebrew, you have to decide what's going to be more important. The balance or the whatever feeling you're trying to evoke whenever you're altering the rules. More often than not, in me now, if I alter the rules for some homebrewing purpose, it's to evoke a certain feel. And if it unbalances the system, I really don't care anymore. As long as all the players are having fun.
Right.
If some players are not having fun, then I will rebalance or just throw it out. But as long as people are having fun, I don't care if the system is balanced anymore.
All right, we're going to end the episode there because we went very long trying to talk about two aspects of the topic, talking about good on paper, bad in execution from both the game master and player's perspective. So we decided to break it up into 2 episodes. So join us next time for part 2 when we talk about good on paper, bad in execution from the player's perspective. This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.